Vayamos tomando asiento, por favor. Bueno, buenos días a todos. Les doy la bienvenida aquí a la CEPAL, a esta ceremonia de asunción de funciones de los miembros del Comité de Apoyo a la Aplicación y Cumplimiento del Acuerdo de Escazú y su primera reunión de trabajo. Me es grato informar que estas actividades, como siempre es habitual en el Acuerdo de Escazú, son abiertas, públicas y se transmiten por web streaming. Y ahora tenemos la ceremonia inaugural. Y para darles precisamente la bienvenida a la CEPAL, le voy a dar la palabra a nuestro querido secretario ejecutivo de la CEPAL, señor José Manuel Salazar Sirinats, quien además es el secretario del Acuerdo de Escazú. Secretario, tiene usted la palabra.
Muchísimas gracias, Carlos. Muy buenos días a todos y todas. Muy bienvenidos a la CEPAL. Quisiera saludar muy especialmente a la señora Cecilia Nicolini, secretaria de Cambio Climático, Desarrollo Sostenible e Innovación de Argentina, quien brillantemente ejerció la presidencia de la COP2 del Acuerdo de Escazú, al señor Marcelo Cousillas, director del área jurídica del Ministerio de Ambiente del Uruguay y presidente de la mesa directiva del Acuerdo de Escazú, a la señora Irene Murillo, representante electa del público y miembro de la mesa directiva y conciudadana. Un gran gusto, señores miembros electos del Comité de Apoyo a la Aplicación y el Cumplimiento del Acuerdo, Cuerpo Diplomático acreditado en Chile, delegadas y delegados, señoras y señores. En mi calidad de secretario ejecutivo de CEPAL y también, como acaba de decir Carlos, secretario del Acuerdo de Escazú, me complace muchísimo darles la bienvenida a la CEPAL, su casa, por supuesto, con motivo de esta ceremonia de asunción de funciones y primera sesión del Comité de Apoyo a la Aplicación y Cumplimiento del Acuerdo. Llegamos al día de hoy después de recorrer un largo camino de construcción regional colaborativa. No solo nos hemos dotado de un tratado regional, sino que nuestro compromiso con su implementación se refleja en que estamos instalando su órgano subsidiario, el comité, establecido en el artículo 18 del acuerdo. Debemos congratularnos y agradecer y reconocer a todos los que han participado y contribuido todos estos años a este logro. Quisiera enfatizar mi agradecimiento a la mesa directiva del acuerdo, Antigua y Barbuda, Santa Lucía, México y en particular a la presidencia del Uruguay y a la vicepresidencia de Argentina, que nos recibió este año en Buenos Aires en ocasión de la segunda conferencia de las partes, donde fueron electos los 7 primeros miembros del comité que hoy asumirán formalmente el cargo. La mesa directiva, como saben, tuvo bajo su responsabilidad elaborar la lista numerada para consideración de la COP y su liderazgo fue determinante para lograr los consensos necesarios y el resultado está a la vista. Mediante la decisión 2-1, las partes eligieron a 7 personas de primerísimo nivel, 4 mujeres y 3 hombres provenientes de 5 estados parte y 2 no parte, con representatividad de las 3 subregiones de América Latina y el Caribe, México y Centroamérica, Caribe y América del Sur. Y estas personas son Guillermo Eduardo Acuña de Chile, Mariana Blengio Valdés de Uruguay, Rita Leonet Joseph Olivete de Granada, Patricia Madrigal Cordero de Costa Rica, Andrés Marín Napoli de Argentina, Carol Denise Ángela Stephens de Jamaica y Félix Winsolis de Panamá. Los 7 integrantes electos del comité cuentan con una reconocida experiencia y competencia en los derechos de acceso en asuntos ambientales y estoy seguro de que darán lo mejor de sí para un asesoramiento dedicado, especializado e independiente que contribuya a la plena y efectiva.
Indeed, the committee that embarks on today has before it the challenging task of laying the foundations of its operation for the benefit of the parties and the public of the regions, and seeks to materialize the principles of the Escazú Agreement, an agreement that is so necessary for a region which has extraordinary natural wealth, but which is seriously under stress. And certainly enough, and just to provide some examples from the region, there was a 94% reduction of the abundance of species since 1970. Deforestation of the legal Amazon and the Cerrado increased by 50% as of 2016. Glaciers in the tropical Andes have lost at least 30% of their area since 1980. Soil erosion affects much of the continent, and there are extraordinary drought events that have occurred. For the region, the temperature increase resulting from climate change alone will cause a reduction of between 1.3 and 3.3% of the GDP per capita by 2030, compared to a scenario without a temperature increase. This could generate an additional 3.2 million poor people. And during the COVID, there was an intense illegal activity that harms the environment. There is a natural basis of our socioeconomic system being affected, and the most vulnerable ones are the ones that are suffering the most. Therefore, we must work together to move towards a new development model that protects our natural wealth and allows us to improve the quality of life of all Latin American Caribbean people. There are solutions that we must all find together within the framework of a culture of dialogue and, of course, the rule of law. And as you know, the important reason of all the activities of ECLAC throughout these years is what I have been able to present and I have expressed as of October last year. ECLAC has meant the transformation of the development model of the countries of the region that have different dimensions. So we can talk about many different transformations that came from where we are at now in productive development, in inclusive growth, and sustainability. These are the three pillars that we have established on purpose, given the 75th anniversary that is in our celebration logo, working for a more inclusive, sustainable, and productive future. The summit of the Amazonia that just ended in Brazil, in Belém do Pará, is showing a regional agreement to look for the solutions of these local problems. And certainly enough, of course, I had the opportunity, as was requested together with Ms. Bouchet, she is the UNDP regional director, to go with her to Brazil. And this included a 2-day visit to the Amazon. This was an extraordinary experience. I had never been in such a place. We not only went to Belém, but also to Santarém, and after a 2-hour flight, we visited a very small indigenous village where we were very welcome. And we were able to hear and establish a dialogue about the concerns that exist in the different indigenous people, including these sustainability issues. So from this perspective, really, the Escazú Agreement is inviting us to reflect on the close link between the protection of the environment and the well-being of people. And this is a tool that will allow us to reach sustainable, inclusive, and integrating development by improving access to data and information and providing for the participation of all social sectors in environmental decision-making processes, particularly vulnerable groups. The agreement fosters more peaceful, just, and prosperous society, strengthens democratic life, and promotes transparent, efficient, and effective public policies and institutions. As you know, the Escazú Agreement is the first regional environmental treaty and the first one at worldwide level to include specific provisions for the protection of human rights defenders in environmental matters. It is also unique in the world as it seeks to guarantee the right of every person to a healthy environment and sustainable development. It was adopted on March 4th, 2018, and became effective on April 22, 2021, currently having 24 signatory countries and 15 state parties. I take this opportunity to call on all countries in the region to join this effort, as all Latin Americans and Caribbean people in the 33 countries deserve this agreement. We must remember that the emphasis of the agreement is on the implementation, creation, and strengthening of capacities in regional cooperation, where all countries have something to contribute and something to gain. And it is on this path that the Implementation and Compliance Support Committee is one of the key instruments available to the agreement to achieve its objective. It is consultative, transparent, non-contentious, non-judicial, and non-punitive. The committee will seek to support the parties in implementing and complying with its principles or provisions based on its rules of composition and operation, approved at the first conference of the parties and per the working modes established. Undoubtedly, with your support, we will be on a better footing to make the agreement a reality in our region. From ICLAC, we express our firm support for your work and will contribute to everything within our reach so that you can fulfill your task. And as you know, with Carlos, you are in very good hands. So again, I congratulate you and wish you every success in performing your duties. Thank you very much. Thank you, Secretary. I would now like to offer the floor to Mr. Marcelo Cusillos, Director of the Legal Counsel's Office of the Ministry of Environment of Uruguay, and is also the Chair of the Presiding Officers of the Escazú Agreement. Thank you, Carlos, and thank you to the Secretariat. Thank you for being here today. Mr. Executive Secretary of ICLAC, Mr. Jose Manuel Salazar, dear Cecilia Nicolini, Chair of the Second Conference of the Parties, Irene Murillo, elected representative of the public, dear friends, dear elected friends that are part of the Committee of Support on this agreement, dear all that are here today and those that are in this room and those that are connected through the different means and that are following us here today. Today is a very important day. It is a day where we will be hearing enormous applauses, rounds of applause. It is a day in which our agreement and environmental democracy is providing us with another step or the path towards the first environmental agreement of the region. After the first conference of the parties held in this very same place in ICLAC in 2022, we made very important decisions, very concrete, and this would provide operational aspects to the agreement. We approved the rules of composition and work of the support team that will be integrated today. But it was very important, the second conference, that extraordinary conference that was held in Buenos Aires, it was held this very same year. As in April, and due to a consensus, the states parties of the agreement, we chose seven members of our region that, given their special conditions, will be participating in the committee. Who are they? Who are these men and women that will be part of this important group of the agreement? They are people that we chose from a very important group of people given their knowledge and their expertise.
They come from the public sector at national level or international agencies. They come from the civil society and they come from academia. Some are faculty members, others are lawyers coming from the private sector, but all have a common denominator, and that is their commitment with environment, a commitment that goes back many years to improve living conditions in our region. Their commitment characterizes them, and I would merely like to highlight this as one of the first elements, but not the only one, because the generosity is another feature common to all of them. This is an activity that they take on as a pro bono activity, that is, in a decided manner, in favor of a cause. But I would also like to highlight their strength, commitment, generosity, strength, their fortitude. Where does this fortitude come? 7 people who are putting their time to carry out this task. It comes from the confidence in that the states, parties, that the people in the region are placing in them. As you know, reaching a consensus in order to elect candidates, members of any agency, is no easy task. It is not easy to achieve. They analyze background, experience, and we recall characteristics, conditions that represent a particular subregion. There be a gender balance, and all of this goes determining things. But consensus is reached with reciprocal concessions, with effort, with dialogue, a lot of dialogue. And that is what happened in Buenos Aires. And that is the outcome that we have today. And that is the strength, the fortitude of these people who are sharing their availability and readiness to be part of this community. The committee is very relevant and will always be so to this agreement. But this first committee has an additional relevance. This first committee will draft and for the first time adopt the modalities of work of the support committee. This first committee will tell us how it is going to support party states and ensure compliance with the agreement. That is a challenge, yes. It is a challenge for them and also for all of us. We know that it is necessary to, in this challenge, pay attention to the needs and specificities of the region and each one of our countries. We know that in drafting those modalities and putting them into effect, it will be essential to have the significant participation by the public. This entire process, and in that too, we are unique, has been a process that was negotiated, put into operation, and that will continue to be implemented with a significant and direct participation by the public. It is our own pathway. The Escazú Agreement decided to take its own path. The committee will somehow devise its own pathway. We must learn from experience. We must take examples from what others have said. But we need creativity that identifies our region, the Latin America and the Caribbean, has its own profile. And from that viewpoint, look, personally, as a Uruguayan, as a Latin American, I really hope that all countries of the region may understand the moment at which we are at and will join the process if they've not yet done so. I spoke of commitment, which is what they all have. But commitment without realizations, commitment without construction, commitment without doing. Look, it's like having a bicycle without wheels. It takes you nowhere. This committee has a commitment and is going to show us its realization. But realization, yes, but actions. Without accountability, it is mere activism, and that would not get us anywhere. Even worse than the bicycle, it would take us to the wrong place. It would take us to where, in fact, we did not wish to go. So I am certain that the commitment is that action and accountability are two features that will be with us thanks to the committee and its members. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much, Marcelo. And now we recognize Maria Cecilia Nigolini, who is Secretariat of Climate Change, Sustainable Development and Innovation of the Ministry of the Environment and Sustainable Development of Argentina, and is also chair of the COP2 Escazú Agreement. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Isn't it nice to be here once again at EDCLAC? I believe it was only yesterday that we held that COP2. And dear Jose Manuel, I would like to congratulate you and your entire team, especially Carlos David and the entire ECLAC team that has made it possible to have that extraordinary COP, as we said in closing, in every sense, and especially on account of the great participation, because people came from all corners of Latin America and the Caribbean, and through magnificent leadership here by our president, Marcelo, we were able to achieve the confirmation of the Implementation and Compliance Support Committee for the Escazú Agreement. And it is so relevant that we are here and to formally begin, because I understand that they have already had a lot of work. In fact, we met this morning early with all the challenges that the committee implies, and we're able to move ahead with the Escazú Agreement. Look, these are complex times, especially with what has been happening in the last few days in the region. I believe that Latin America and the Caribbean, once again, faces very great challenges that could checkmate our activity, our democracy, and that in fact these spaces for dialogue, for discussion, for consensus should be the main tool to respond to these challenges. As the Secretary just said, the challenge not only climate change, but the treble planetary crisis that we are going through, and that hits our dear Latin America and the Caribbean as in no other region of the world on account of our vulnerabilities, without being our countries the most responsible for this crisis that we're going through, and which also has to do with the levels of poverty, being the most unequal region in the world, and that governments must also respond to that. And we cannot choose between paying off the debt, where our countries are over in debt, on many cases on account of the irresponsibility of certain governments. but we also need to respond to the needs of people. We need to combat the scourge of poverty and inequality, and also address the climate change that also hits the most vulnerable all the harder. And this is also affected by another of the major issues that we have in the region, which is political violence. I think that we cannot ignore what happened in the last few days with the murder of the candidate in Ecuador. That violence that is exacerbated and that we saw in our country with the attempted murder of the vice president, Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, and the installed violence in our society. And that has meant that we've had to suspend, as you know, in Argentina, we're in the midst of an electoral process right now, and all party events were suspended until next Sunday on account of a situation which was the murder of an 11-year-old little girl. I believe that our dear region, our dear Latin America and the Caribbean is very injured, and that the Escazú Agreement, I believe, must serve us as a tool for construction, as a tool for development, as a tool to strengthen our democracies, and also as a tool for peace, to defend those who most defend our territories, and that they put their body into fighting those situations. And it is a challenge. I do not want to frighten off our dear members of the committee. This is a task that we must resolve among us all. It is something that we need to face, and as we said this morning, it's not only the states parties, but also the society as a whole, not only the civil society, but also enterprises, transnationals, also who invest, and that very often exploit, in the worst sense of the word, our territories, our natural resources. We must demand from them the need to maintain environmental, social, and economic sustainability that we need for our region. And so, for those of us who work on this and who do policies, we must be optimistic. We must find in policies the space, the mechanisms for transformation that will allow us to respond based on these aims that we want to achieve. We believe that multilateralism and these spaces here, such as ECLAC, that have really been a house where we have taken shelter and has helped us to drive forwards with the agreement, and we're very grateful. We want this to be a multilateralism that is also practical, useful, a multilateralism that does not speak solely nice words, but that bring us to action. Because we see, on the one hand, that high time the General Secretary is speaking of the boiling point that we are reaching, and then speaking of the need to get to work. But on the other hand, we're fighting an account of fund for losses and damages for our countries. And we have the U.S. climate envoy who says that they're not going to put up $1 to the fund, and taking on these responsibilities, historical and current responsibility for the current climate change or climate crisis. I trust that these spaces, multilateral spaces, will help us to move ahead with the agenda. I believe that it is also a debt pending in the region, and we are channeling or rechanneling this, and we know that together we will get further, and that regional integration must be once and for all, so that all countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, and even with their differences, political, geographical, historical, economic, but that these be the strengths, so that we may be a major bloc to defend our interests and be able to respond to our citizens. And with that, I believe that the Escazú Agreement, as we were saying this morning, is a ray of hope. It is a bridge that invites us, in the face of these differences, to meet and work to defend our territories, to defend our institutions, to defend our democracies, to make them more robust. And in the case of Argentina this year, is our anniversary of 40 years of democracy. What it's cost us many lives, a lot of blood, and it affects our history. Also in Chile, this is a very important year, recalling the tragic coup. And so I believe that this space, putting the committee into action with the responsibility this implies and the commitment being demonstrated, and with a committee that, as Marcelo very well highlighted, its talent and professionalism and expertise of the members. We are all very proud of the composition of this committee and also the diversity that in all of its aspects. The fact that there are more women than men is like a little victory for us of having a committee that hopefully is a feminist committee, because we want to be the most diverse and plural, most feminist region in all decision-making spaces, and that I believe will allow us to achieve a level of development that is more inclusive, sustainable, and above all, for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cecilia, and I would like to greet the secretary for being here. We would like to invite Ms. Irene Murillo, elected representative of the public from Costa Rica, so that she can talk to us. Thank you. Good morning. I am very happy to be here. Mr. Jose Manuel Salazar, Executive Secretary of ECLAC and Secretary of Escazú, Ms. Irene Amarillo, elected representative of the public, Ms. Nicolini, Vice Chair of the presiding officers, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you that are here today and for those that are connected digitally with us, special greetings, and especially for all of the organizations from the public. The situation of our region is quite complicated. The need of implementing access to information, to participation, and to justice in environmental issues, and generating an environment that is the proper area for defenders of the environment is critical. And it is also quite necessary. I want to repeat myself there. Nonetheless, the elected representatives of the public would like to transmit an optimism in this area, without forgetting those processes that are still pending of being signatories of the rest of the countries of the region to this agreement. The installation of the Implementation and Compliance Support Committee, together with the implementation plans that the states parties are already applying, working on, means that we're on the proper path of the implementation of the Escazú Agreement. We are taking very important steps towards this activity. This committee is framed in the goals or objectives of Article 1 of the agreement. It is related to the creation of capacities with cooperation, with the support to the implementation of each of these rights, and to the protection of those that are defenders of the environment in each of our countries. Therefore, it is a fundamental step that we have to be very happy about. Candidacy, as it was already mentioned by the previous speakers, were the result of a process that was an open process with good discussion points where the public had a voice. And I think that is very important to remember, as it is really the path to the Escazú Agreement. So the approach of this committee with the capacity creation and cooperation are able to shape a committee that is non-contentious and non-punitive. that will be working with the proper participation of the public. It is once again an innovative aspect that is made for the needs of Latin America and the Caribbean. And its function will be the support to the states in the promotion of the application of the agreement and the implementation as well. I believe this opens tremendous possibilities that are all positive for the region, and it is important to be able to view this in this area. So please receive on behalf of the public representative our congratulations. And of course, the thanks to what you will be developing in the following years. We wish you success, and we are all sure that the impact of the Implementation and Compliance Support Committee will have is necessary. Thank you very much. Thank you, Irene. We want to thank the authorities for participating in this opening ceremony, and we want you to stay in the room as now we will formally be working on the assumption of duties by the members of this committee due to the decision 2.1 of the Conference of the Parties. The procedure will be as following. We will be calling each individually and in alphabetical order by your last names to be able to sign a declaration that you will probably remember. It is part of the rules 2.7 of the rules of composition and functioning, approved by 1.3 decision of the Conference of the Parties. Each of the authorities here will be presenting an acknowledgement given the commitment that we all have with you. And these is a special edition of the basic text of the Escazú agreement that we are sure will be guiding your work. Later on, each of you will be taking a picture with the authorities. We would then start, and we will provide you with the microphone. This will be the place to be able to swear and sign. And we will first call Mr. Guillermo Acuña, the elected member from Chile, and it will be presented by our executive secretary, Mr. Jose Manuel. Good morning. I, Guillermo Eduardo Acuña, solemnly declare that I will be carrying out my activities in the Implementation and Compliance Support Committee with total honesty, independently, impartial, and conscience, agreeing with the agreement to access of public participation and access to justice in environmental aspects in Latin America and the Caribbean, Escazú agreement with the rules of composition and functioning of this committee to in the Implementation and Compliance Support Committee and the modalities of work that this committee will be creating.
Y solicitamos a las
We would like to request our authorities to please come up here and take a picture with Guillermo.
A continuación, vamos a hacer.
We will now meet Ms. Mariana Blenchio from Uruguay, and she will be presented by Mr. Marcelo Cosillas. I, Mariana Blenjo Valdez, solemnly declare that I will be carrying out my activities in the Implementation and Compliance Support Committee with total honesty, independently, impartially, and conscious, agreeing with the regional agreement to access to information, public participation, and access to justice in environmental issues in Latin America and the Caribbean, and the Escazú Agreement, the rules of composition and functioning of the Support Committee in Implementation and Compliance Support Committee, and the modalities of work that the committee creates. The picture, please. Thank you. Now, please, Ms. Rita Joseph Olivetti from Grenada and Ms. Cecilia Nicolini will be presenting the gift.
Good day.
I, Rita Leonid Joseph Olivetti, solemnly declare that I will perform my functions as member of the Committee to Support Implementation and Compliance honestly, independently, impartially, and conscientiously, and in accordance with the Regional Agreement on Access to Information, Public Participation, and Access to Justice in Environmental Matters in Latin America and the Caribbean, Escazú Agreement. The rules relating to the structure and functions of the Committee to Support Implementation and Compliance, and the working modalities to be adopted by the Committee.
Thank you very much. And
Now we will hear from Ms. Patricia Madrigal Cordero from Costa Rica, and one of the mothers of the Escazú Agreement, and she will be presented with the token of appreciation.
Buenos días.
Good morning. I, Patricia Madrigal Cordero, solemnly declare that I will carry out my functions in the Implementation and Compliance Committee in honestly, independence, impartially, and conscious, and in accordance with the Regional Agreement on Access to Information, public participation, and access to justice in environmental matters in Latin America and the Caribbean, Escazú Agreement, the rules of composition and functioning of the Implementation and Compliance Support Committee, and modalities of work that the committee creates.
Llamamos ahora a don Andrés María Napoli.
Now we have Mr. Andrés María Napoli, and it will be presented by Mr. Jose Manuel Salazar. Good morning. I, Andrés María Napoli, solemnly declare that I will carry out my functions in the Implementation and Compliance Support Committee with honesty, independency, impartiality, and conscience, and in accordance with the Regional Agreement on Access to Information, Public Participation, and Access to Justice in Environmental Matters in Latin America and the Caribbean, Escazú Agreement, the rules of composition and functioning of the Support Committee, if the Implementation and Compliance Support Committee, and its activities.
And now is the time to Carol Denise Angela Stephens. This is for you. Y la acompañará don Marcelo Causinas.
Good morning, everyone. I, Carol Denise Angela Stephens, solemnly declare that I will perform my functions as member of the Committee to Support Implementation and Compliance honestly, independently, impartially, and conscientiously, and in accordance with the Regional Agreement on Access to Information, Public Participation, and Access to Justice in Environmental Matters in Latin America and the Caribbean, the Escazú Agreement, and rules relating to the structure and functions of the Committee to Support Implementation and Compliance, and the working modalities to be adopted by the Committee. Thank you.
Y finalmente llamo a hacer la declaración a don Félix
Mr. Felix Wing Solis from Panama, and it will be presented by Mrs. Celia Nicolini. Good afternoon. I, Felix Wing Solis, solemnly declare I will perform my functions in the Implementation and Compliance Support Committee with honesty, independently, impartially, and conscientiously, and in accordance with the Regional Agreement to access to information, public participation, and the access to justice in environmental matters in Latin America and the Caribbean. Escazú Agreement, the rules of composition and functioning of the Implementation and Compliance Support Committee, and the modalities of work that the committee creates. Thank you very much.
Muy bien, tomemos asiento.
Okay, let's be seated.
Y para honrar la decisión 2.
To honor 2.1 decision of the Conference of the Parties and to conclude this assumption ceremony, I will offer the floor to the chair of the presiding officers.
Gracias, Carlos.
Thank you, Carlos. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having taken part in this part of today's activity, this ceremony, and elected members of the ICSC having formulated the precept formulation. You are now invested as members of said committee, and so we invite you to proceed in this session with the first meeting of the committee. I wish you every success. Well, congratulations by the Secretariat, and welcome, and let's continue to row. So, we begin this first session of the committee, and as outlined in the rules, we will now proceed with the election of the chair and vice chair, or president, vice president. And now we should elect the chair, or vice or president, and the two vice chairs. We have agreed that the first will be Patricia Madrigal Cordero as president or chair. And that the vice chairs will be Andres Napoli and Carol Stevens. In any case, we remind you that all members of the committee will have a lot of work and will all be equally involved. I would now like to invite Patricia Madrigal to take office as the chair of the committee and proceed with the reading of the committee reading and the positions. We do not have a declaration, right? No, it doesn't matter. Now, since the information has been formally expressed in the hall, we will now proceed with the words by the chairman of the committee, Mrs. Patricia Madrigal. The floor is yours. Well, good afternoon. And I thank you all very much for your attendance, and a special greetings to Marcelo Cosillas, who is the president of the presiding officers, and also Maria Cecilia Nicolini as the chair of the second COP, and Irene Murillo as the elected representative of the public, and everyone who is following us online and in person. Today, the mandate formally begins, and that the states parties have deposited in us, the members of the first Implementation and Compliance Support Committee, were committed to the trust placed in us by states, parties, and support by the public. And now we must honor our appointments and ensuring that our actions and decisions may be directed towards the implementation as well as the compliance of the Escazú Agreement, strengthening capacities in the region to ensure the compliance of access rights, respect for a healthy environment for present and future generations, especially those most vulnerable, ensuring a setting that is appropriate for the work of the defenders of environmental matters. And in the negotiation process of the Escazú Agreement, it was determined that its nature should be a consultative, transparent, non-contentious, non-judicial, and non-punitive body. It is made up of 7 members who were elected at the extraordinary COP meeting in Argentina in April this year, seeking gender parity and geographical balance. 2 from the Mesoamerican region, sub-region, 3 from South America, and 2 from the Caribbean. We do not represent any particular country, and our work is pro bono. According to the rules for the composition and functioning of the Implementation and Compliance Support Committee adopted in Decision 1-3 of the First Conference of the Parties in Santiago, the Implementation and Compliance Support Committee shall perform its functions with honesty, independence, impartially, and conscientiously. We understand that our actions shall not be subject to any direction, influence, pressure, or pressure of any kind, nor shall we seek or accept instructions from anyone in connection to the performance of our duties. We understand the nature of our mandate as independent experts. Within our functions, we should support the Conference of Parties with reports on systemic issues, on specific issues, on compliance or non-compliance of a party, on the interpretation of the agreement. Support states parties with visits and/or advice for implementation and compliance. Support the public, ensuring their meaningful participation or when they're at risk due to attacks, threats, or intimidation. We may also receive submissions from a state, party, or the public at the end of the next COP meeting, which will be held here in Santiago in April 2024. We must also bear in mind that we may not receive communications regarding a party's compliance earlier than 1 year after the entry into force of the agreement for that party. We will therefore ensure that decisions be made independently, impartially, and objectively on the basis of the relevant facts and applicable regulations, ensuring equal treatment and non-discrimination in the application of procedures and in the exercise of its functions. We accept that the confidentiality of exchanges and deliberations within the committee must be safeguarded, and that this duty will remain even after we've ceased to be members of the committee. We began working as soon as we were elected during the second COP in Argentina. And our main objective now is to work on the modalities of work we have meeting to discussion of this topic so as to strengthen our teamwork. And we are working on a draft and will continue to advance in the construction of these working modalities in consultation with the presiding officers, states, parties, representatives of the public, members of other similar committees, and open dialogues, as requested under decision 2/1 of the Conference of the Parties. We will report on our progress at the coming COP meeting in 2024. We must not only work on the modalities of work, we have a great challenge collaborating in the special attention that Article 9 grants to human rights defenders in environmental matters. And we must keep in mind the people and groups in situation of vulnerability that receive special and cross-cutting attention under the agreement. It's also important to seek funding to enable the Escazú Agreement governance to function and to allow each of the bodies to comply with the broad functions granted. We have made considerable progress in the region. The Escazú Agreement process is an example of how multilateralism strengthens dialogue, achieves consensus, and strengthens capacities and cooperation. However, the challenge is complex and requires every effort to gradually and progressively we may improve compliance with human rights in the region in order to strengthen democracy. The Escazú Agreement process is inspired in great values that we must always keep in mind and that were included in the Lima vision at the beginning: equality, inclusion, progressiveness, transparency, and which were later embodied in the principles contained in Article 3, where the principle of good faith is used to build bridges for joint work by the public, states, parties, and signatory states, and the entire governance structure of the agreement. We believe that the committee must work collectively and collaboratively among all members, making decisions as far as possible by consensus and in a participatory manner, so that all members have a responsibility, both in the sub-working groups as well as the rapporteurships. We hope to contribute to strengthen the foundations that have allowed us to come this far and open the paths that will guide us to a gradual and progressive implementation and compliance among the states, parties, and the public. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Patricia. And so now I will hand over to the vice chairs for their intervention. Mr. Andres Napoli, please go ahead.
Buenos días otra.
Good morning again. Mr. Marcelo Cosillas, Chair of the Presiding Officers, Ms. Nicolina, Vice Chair, and President of the COP that chose this committee, Ms. Murillo, the representative of the public, and the participants of the Escazú Agreement, chaired by Carlos, David, Gabriela, that work on a day-to-day basis in this agreement and are always cooperating in all our tasks. For those of you that are here today in the room, thank you very much for being here. And for those of you that are through streaming, and as Patricia mentioned, we are starting our activities in this Implementation and Compliance Support Committee for the Escazú Agreement. It is an honor for us, the ones that were chosen in Buenos Aires. We are very glad to participate. Given this is such an important group, every time we talk to you, it would be important to review the purpose of the committee, the purpose that was allocated by the agreement, and it is a committee that in its mandate is supporting the parties as it was established and mentioned by Patricia. And this has been the spirit that the different countries have expressed when drafting the Escazú Agreement. It is open to receiving communications from the states parties as well as the public that can guarantee the activities of the agreement or maybe express any allegations in its dispositions. We also have to remember that the committee is always supported by the rules of composition and functioning that was approved by the Conference of the Parties, number one. And also it has to establish the modalities of work. The main goal is to establish guidelines that will consider the way of working. And those activities that we're doing together with the Secretariat is considering the organization of the work and the sessions, the presentation of the reports, any advisory activities for the parties in the agreement, the treatment of communications that the committee will provide of anything that the public expresses, the special measures by those vulnerable groups, the mechanisms of fast response to those groups that are under risk, and of course, the impartiality, independence rules that have already been mentioned. Given that it is expected that the committee will receive important requirements, we are proposing the functioning of at least 3 subcommittees of work, and we can highlight the ones that are supporting the parties, supporting the different countries, the subcommittee of communications that will have its main mission to consider admissibility of anything that is received by the committee. And given that this is part of the activities that will not end, we're also considering the functioning of a subcommittee of reports and follow-up. Likewise, the modes of work are including special rapporteurship defined by the needs established. Each of these subcommittees will be part of the members of the committee, and we hope that this will be part of the different activities that we will be carrying out. All those tasks will be carried out in maximum transparency and with dialogue and participation of the public, such as it has always been in the Escazú Agreement premises. The states parties and those that are participating in the different areas of the agreement will make a tremendous effort to provide the best responses possible to have the Escazú Agreement text become a tool that will provide more rights and will protect our people in Latin America and the Caribbean is a task that we all have to carry out together. We are aware that the times that are coming are very complicated, but are also challenging. We are sharing these ideas, and we know that the Escazú Agreement will improve the decision-making process in environmental aspects in the region, allowing for more people to have more information, quality information, and as wide as possible, so that the environmental justice concerns can be properly responded. I hope that the defenders can carry out their life in peace and protected, and we will be working towards the access be proper, and you have our full commitment. Thank you very much. Thank you, Andres. I would now like to offer the floor to Carol Stephens.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and to the presiding officers, Mr. Marcelo Cosillas and Ms. Cecilia Nicolini, also to members, representatives of the public and public online. It's our honor to officially take on our role and duties today. And as we do so, we are very focused on ensuring we work to support parties' implementation and compliance, and also ensure the public's significant participation in our work from the region. Over the next few days, we will have both formal and informal meetings in Santiago today, and we will continue our deliberations on our working modalities and begin formulating a work plan with the significant participation of the public in our minds. We have all spoken together as a committee, and we're committed to the principle of significant participation in finalizing our working modalities and in the implementation of our work. We believe this is a core value of the Escazú Agreement, which inherently involves public participation and has been globally recognized since the process's inception at Rio+20 in Brazil, and also during its negotiation as a regional instrument. Now more than ever, we are dedicated that our work must ensure that we have significant public participation during the implementation stage. We are conscious of the mandate given to us under the rules relating to the structure and functions of the Committee to Support Implementation and Compliance, which mandates us to provide general comments on the interpretation of the agreement, including receiving queries from parties, state parties, and the public, and to engage in periodic consultations and dialogues with each of the parties, either during committee meetings or during visits to the countries, and also our commitment to hold open dialogues with parties and members of the public on issues of concern. We are very, very excited to start the process of assisting parties and the public after our working modalities have been finalized, both for implementation and compliance. And we encourage both state parties and the public, in line with the functions and the rules of the committee, to utilize the committee in these roles. We look forward to active participation also in the preparation of our reports. The rules require us to ensure that the public may participate in the functions of the committee in accordance with its working modalities, and they actually frame this participation specifically as rights. These rights include the right of the public to provide information to the committee, the preparation of general observations on the interpretation of the agreement, also the right in the application of the agreement to be part of consultations and dialogues, to be part of public hearings, also to participate in the meetings of the committee. This requires significant thoughtfulness, creativity, and innovation by the committee to live up to these values and ensure that our working modalities, and in reality, we ensure that significant participation happens. We are also required to consider in our work and pay attention to national capacities and circumstances, understanding particular needs of vulnerable groups and environmental human rights defenders, ensure that there is knowledge of our role and our work, and that people can participate in ways that are accordance with their realities. So lastly, we are considering in how to build these modalities to ensure that we ensure regional participation, online dialogues, and that we get feedback on the working modalities as we start our work. We're also considering how to ensure vulnerable groups and environmental human rights defenders can specifically also participate. The work ahead of us is challenging but also exciting, and we understand the high expectations of state parties and the public in us ensuring the implementation of this agreement. We commit to make every effort to meet your expectations, and we accept the challenge before us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Y aprovecho a dar la...
I would like to welcome Ms. Rojas from Chile, Ministry of the Environment. I would like to offer the floor to the chair of the committee. Should she have any additional information? Patricia, you have the floor. I think it is important for those that are here today in the room and for those that are online to talk about the future steps of the committee. In this very first working session, we will be working on creating a work plan for the following 2 years, and the general guidelines of this work modalities. We have also thought about the adoption of a voluntary ethical code so that these values of independence and impartiality values can be accessed in the webpage at the Secretariat. The rules of composition and functioning, it establishes that the committee will be working once a year on a face-to-face possibility and at least 2 more times virtually or online. Therefore, it is considered that later on and right after the meeting and the next Conference of the Parties, April 2024, the committee can hold that in-person meeting. We will hold a virtual meeting in November and another virtual meeting in March 2024. As we have already expressed it in the creation of the working modalities, it is expected to have the support of similar committees that have functions in the application and compliance of human rights or environmental matters. All these meetings with the presiding officers of the states parties and the public. And finally, we understand that there is a need within the region of promoting the content of the Escazú agreement, not only the functions that are to be carried by the Implementation and Compliance Support Committee, but also the agreement in itself and the processes of implementation that are being given in the different countries.
There is a provision of the committee, which is a characteristic of the Escazú agreement process, to maintain the maximum dissemination and communication and transparency of all work carried out. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And not being any further business, although we all know there is much work still to be done, I would end this first session, but I would like to add to some of the items of the agenda that Mrs. Patricia has mentioned. And since there are many people who may now be involved in the process, it is important to say that as a result of the first COP held in Santiago last year, a number of activities were initiated and currently ongoing. One of the decisions gave rise to the creation of a working group on defenders of human rights and environmental matters led by Chile, Ecuador, and St. Kitts and Nevis. And that working group is working on outlining a regional action plan for the defenders of human rights and environmental matters, and already was submitted to public consultation. And in late August, there will be an online meeting of this open group. And in Panama on September 26th through 28th, we will have a regional forum on defenders of human rights and environmental matters, organized together with the UN, FPA, and the High Commissioner of the UN for Human Rights, and with the support of the World Bank. And this forum will allow us to move ahead with the content of that action plan. At the next COP meeting, that of course, once the drafts are ready, they will undergo public consultation. The third COP meeting of an ordinary type will be held here in Santiago Neclac from April 22 through 24. The COP meeting is always held in around 22nd of April, which coincides with the International Day of Mother Earth, and which is when the agreement was signed. And we will also take the opportunity on 25th and 26th. The conference will be 22, 24, and 25 and 26. So we will be able to have an in-person meeting of the working group. In parallel, also, I would like to say that several countries of the region are working on their plans for national implementation. That is, the agreement continues to be constructed. There are plans for national implementation that the countries are carrying out, and that contains the articulates of the agreement. And this has been focused on the defenders on account of the regional reality, and the committee will be working on the modalities. And so this will be a very intense year to continue elaborating the content of the agreement. And so I would like to call on all countries that are signatories but not yet parties, and those who are not yet signatories, that the agreement is open to the 33 countries of Latin America, and that we are at that moment of construction. Everyone is welcome. This is an agreement for dialogue that encourages the culture of dialogue, and so we're hoping that you will join us, as the Executive Secretary has said. And so I would be closing the other business, and we will move on to another very important matter of the day, the inspiration brought to us by the Minister of the Environment of Chile to any of the meetings she takes part in. And so to end today, I will recognize Maisa Rojas, who is the Minister of the Environment of Chile and who has always inspired us greatly in the fight against climate change and now other matters. And so therefore, she will give us the last address. Go ahead. Well, thank you very much, Carlos, for these kind words. The bar is high, and so I would like to greet not only Carlos here representing ECLAC, Maria Cecilia Negolini, the Secretary of Climate Change in Argentina, and also Marcela Cecilia from Uruguay, and most especially the members of the ICSC and all members at this meeting. I thank you for this space, this solemn occasion, which is the swearing in of the first members of this support committee. Your outstanding professional trajectories and unquestionable commitment to environmental democracy facilitated an ample consensus by the states and led to the backing of the public, allowing their election at the recent COP meeting. And so I would like to take the opportunity to especially thank Maria Cecilia Nicolini and the chair of the presiding officers for having led the work and paving the way so that today we may have this subsidiary body in operation. A committee that reflects not only experience and knowledge, but also good geographic and gender diversity. And what we need is to improve our decision-making processes and implementation, because the situation where we are at is critical and we require transformative changes. The last report of the IPCC says that we still have a window of opportunity in order to ensure a friendly and sustainable future, but that the window is closing fast. I suppose that we are all very much aware of what has happened in the last month, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, but not only in the Northern Hemisphere. South America has been no exception. So much so that the Secretary General has called to even change the language from global warming to global boiling. And so, for this government, the irrestricted commitment to human rights is a priority. And we're hoping to contribute to, in addition to the protection and promotion, as recent members of the Council of Human Rights and as the chair of the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations. And what we intend is to relay the themes of the 2030 Agenda greatly rooted in Escazú, such as reducing inequality gaps, strengthening the rule of law, dialogue, and citizen participation, cross-cutting the gender approach, and adopting necessary measures in order to achieve peaceful and inclusive societies. As Chile, we ratified the main multilateral environmental agreements because we know that this is a necessary step, but also we are aware that it is insufficient. And that is why we also party to coalitions such as the Climatic Vision Alliance, the Commitment to Methane, and the Friends for the Biosphere. At regional level, we also promote a decision at the Forum of the Ministers of the Environment to move ahead in gender equality in Latin America and the Caribbean, among other things. As has been said today, the treaty is strengthened with this institutionality. The Escazú Agreement was negotiated by the region and for the region, recognizing that it was necessary to address the circumstances and challenges proper to it and act progressively but without setting back. And it is this framework of public policy that will be strengthened with the incident participation by the public for cooperation among countries, and now to the functioning of this committee. For the adaptability of Escazú, in turn, this is accompanied, she corrects herself, she says, because adaptability is accompanied by emphasis on an effective implementation. And so we appreciate in the aim of the agreement and constantly reaffirm this in several of the provisions. It could not be any other way because we are obliged to raise the standards of access rights, recognizing that in addition to being human rights in themselves, these contribute to the human right to a clean and healthy environment and sustainable development. And so therefore, in particular for the environmental portfolio, this is a pillar throughout our activities. As a state that is member, we support the functioning of the committee that is assuming its functions today, and also we assume the recommendations and assistance. We give faith that international bodies will help us to improve our performance, promoting Escazú. In March 24, we will have a new assessment of the OECD of the progress and gaps in terms of our international commitments and with regard to the environment. And also, we are expectant of the conclusions after the visit to Chile of the Special Rapporteur for the Environment and Human Rights and a champion of Escazú, Mr. David Boyd. We're hoping that his findings and recommendations may strengthen the measures that as a government we are adopting in order to overcome serious situations in our country that, as he pointed out, represent an environmental crisis that are threatening and interconnected. And so we too understand this. And also, together with the Republic of Colombia, we have requested the International Court of Human Rights a consultative opinion in order to clarify the scope of state obligations in order to respond to the climate emergency within the framework of the International Framework of Human Rights, with especially taking into account the differentiated affectations that this emergency has on people in various regions and population groups of nature and human survival in our planet. Chile is committed to the progress of Escazú at national level and will continue to actively work for its progress at a regional level, and also be party to the main multilateral conventions is not in itself sufficient. Neither is it excuse to not have a national laws to strengthen this. We want to strengthen our environmental democracy through three main pillars, convinced that human rights must be defended always, and that a safe and peaceful setting is essential in order to build more prosperous, sustainable, inclusive, and resilient societies. And so we have trained more than 2,000 officers in the public sector, and we are working to identify and drive forward more than 60 management measures in order to improve access rights, and we are bent on implementing a plan that we have called Plan for the Participatory Implementation of Escazú. The plan is currently at the stage of early participation and will subsequently be subject to public consultation. We trust it will allow us to identify gaps and priority measures in order to move ahead in the implementation of the treaty. There's barely more than 6 months for the 15 Escazú states parties and ideally new countries that will join may meet once again here at ECLAC, and that this has been a secretariat that is committed deeply to our single regional treaty. I would like to take the opportunity to once again thank everyone for your dedication and constant work so that today we can say we can wager in favor of multilateralism and collaboration among countries in order to address the issues and questioning of democracy and answer with more democracy, as has been said on multiple occasions by our president. And same as today is a solemn day, the next COP is key for the legitimacy of Escazú.
Let us remember that to be able to support the implementation of Article 9 of the agreement, the first COP established a work group for the defenders of the human rights in environmental matters. This group carries out their activity under the coordination of Ecuador, St. Kitts and Nevis, and Chile, and should present an action plan for the next COP for their consideration and approval. We are fully committed and we believe we will reach that goal. We then have the tremendous challenge of creating a plan that will respond to the dramatic reality of our region, where all those that are defending and promoting environment are always attacked, intimidated, and they receive threats like no other place in the world. The public consultation done for the proposal of the index of this plan considers a positive evaluation on how to view this task. We are therefore in the proper path, but we require more work and be able to receive approval by consensus and the support of the public. I would like to earnestly call all of you here, members of the committee, representatives of the public, presiding officers, the CLAC, states parties, and general public that should always make the tremendous effort to contribute to this goal, not only as a mandate of the COP, but rather an ethical element that we all should consider. I would like to repeat my congratulations and thanks to the members of the committee, and I would like to repeat the commitment that we have to this agreement, establishing the principles of our a commitment to democracy, human rights respect, and the responsibility to cooperate and to be able to move towards a sustainable development that will allow to overcome the environmental crisis that we're going through. Thank you very much.
Quisiera
I would like to to thank 3 times, not because of the crisis, but to the minister because she's here. It's her birthday. And because Chile has signed the voluntary agreement to the Escazú agreement.
con eso casi
So we're almost done today. We have 2 important activities. The first one is the group photo, where we all have to participate, as the committee has to be present with all of those that will be participating, the different parties, etc. And we will finally have, when going out of this room, we will be able to celebrate the choosing of these 7 marvelous members that have been that will be working for the region. So please, I would like to invite you to come up here for the group photo.
Los colegas.
Our colleagues in the back of the room, if you would like to be part of the picture, please. You are all welcome.
Los más altos atrás, por favor. Todos como en la bandera, por favor. Si es posible. Sí, sí. Adelante. Ya se ve. Venga, acá está el lugar, aquí atrás no hay lugar. Ahí entra y aquí no. Ustedes tres, por favor, y te vas a salir. Ahí. Muchas gracias.